giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast, and here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Okay, so this week we have a fabulous episode for you, and I say that building this intro with Dina already on the line, just simply because we've already had such a fabulous conversation that I even said to her, oh shoot, we should be recording already. But I am welcomed by Dina Farmer of Spectrum Getaways. We're going to be talking about a niche. She has a spectacular niche, and I'm going to get her to describe it a little bit more for you. But we're also going to talk about part of that other side. What if you don't get that instant success and other such from a niche? So we're going to talk about where the sales and marketing kind of come together and really build out that next step. So without further ado, welcome, Dina.
Hi, Glenda. Thank you for having me. Oh, I'm so excited.
Well, I am so excited to have this conversation. And like I said, before we started recording, the conversation we were having was fantastic. And I just want to say thank you first and foremost, right off the gate, because we're going to talk about possibly where not everything is all sunshine and roses and unicorns and everything else. But so I want to thank you just right off the hop for being willing to have this conversation, because I think you're going to help so many advisors who feel like they're the only one, who feel like everybody else has got it all together and everything's perfect and everything's this, and that they're the only one who struggles. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about your niche. You just rebranded. Can you tell us what is your niche and how it is that you help people?
Yes. So I did just rebrand. I used to be Lily and Magnolia Travel, if you if you know me from there, but I am now Spectrum Getaways. And I help families with autistic children travel the world. And it's a very personal niche to me because both my boys are autistic. And so, as I've said so many times before, I decided to pivot during 2020. At the Bookmore Travel Conference, I remember very specifically doing it there. Because we're a military family and I wanted to help my oldest son be able to travel, because at the time I didn't know my youngest son was also autistic. And through that diagnosis, I said, well, if we're struggling, then other autistic families must also be struggling with traveling. And that is when I decided to not only help myself, but to help other families as well. And it's been a journey.
I bet. You know, anybody who's ever traveled with children know that traveling with children can be a struggle, much less now we add in some diagnosis and things like that. And it just kind of becomes next level. Now, that wasn't something my family faced, but I will say that no matter what the diagnosis is, when we're talking about something medical, talking about something mental health, anything like that, it shifts the struggles of a family just on the day-to-day world. And so I would think that travel would just be that thing that I think probably a lot of parents think that's no longer possible.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot of, well, it's just my child has a hard time when they're not at their regular routine, or it's too difficult because of this sensory need and that sensory need, or they don't like crowds, or my child elopes, which it means runs away.
Okay.
And like, how do I keep my child from eloping, or how do I keep people from staring at my child because they're stimming or they're having a behavior or something? And behavior is communication, no matter what way you want to swing it. The child is obviously trying to tell you something regardless of what's happening, but there's all these big hurdles, even down to eating. Like, some places, chicken nuggets don't taste the same everywhere. You know?
Okay, I can attest to that. And there's some restaurants I'm like, how do you screw up chicken nuggets? But you totally did. Yeah.
So true. But yeah, there's a lot of barriers to travel, or reasons why they don't want to travel. Or it's like, even going to the park for some families that I work with it's really hard. So why would I want to go on a 12-day cruise to Iceland and Ireland, with my child?
Yeah. When I sold travel full time, I had a client and I didn't realize when I first started working with them anything about their child in terms of being on the spectrum or anything like that. The first time they came to me, they said they wanted to do an all inclusive, but they were like, it has to have great room service. And I didn't, and I fully admit, I didn't ask a lot of questions because this was fairly early on. And at that point, I did still do full consultations, but I was missing the why. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I can definitely set you up with something with good room service, but I never asked the why. And I think it was on their second trip that I was, okay, no, I want to know more about the client. And what it was is that one of their children was on the spectrum and the smell of food was their big trigger. So to go into the buffet was extremely triggering. So on the days where he was struggling a bit, they didn't want to take him to the buffet. They wanted to be able to order him room service and have that delivered to the room. And I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. So then part of that also then became, okay, we got to make sure the room is of a next level, if you will, because clearly they're going to spend a lot more time in it than perhaps other people would. And so we shifted the location of the room. They did a lot of beach vacations. So we did things where their room was close to the beach so that if they needed to take the one child back, the other ones could still be there and they could still, see them and create opportunities for the family to be more together so
Yeah.
that they could still have, I don't want to say normal because I don't like that term in this sort of concept, but more of the traditional type family vacation, but yet not fully removing the other one out. And same for the parents. I always wanted to make sure then the parents could still enjoy that ocean breeze because that then became one of the things is that they like, I love this because my child got to sit on the deck and got to color and I still got to stare at the ocean and watch my
Yeah.
other kids play. And so we then started creating an entirely different experience for them. And it came down to the why. And I was so thankful that those parents shared with me because I could tell they were very uncomfortable at first to talk about it. But then I was like, oh, well, then we need to make this better for you. And so it's having those conversations and it's knowing that a vacation's not a vacation for everybody.
Right.
Can be something entirely different. I've told the story before where I had a client come to me and said, I need a vacation or my wife's going to leave me because she is stressed out. We're solving problems. That's what we're doing. And I would think that you are in a heavy niche where there is a lot of overstimulation for the parents, just in day to
Mhm.
day, much less on vacation.
I would totally agree. Um, and I think the biggest thing is just like getting over that idea that travel is impossible, or that you have to do it alone. Because that's one of the bigger things that I try to explain to my clients is like, yeah, I can't be there, but I do have partners that are able to be there with you. So like if you needed a respite care provider or a babysitter, either term you want to use interchangeable, um, like that is something that I can definitely book for you so that you have a third set
Yep.
of adult hands with
Yep.
you on location. And these people are trained like with supporting autistic individuals while they're traveling, so it's not like you're going in with someone who has no idea what they're doing or being able to sign up for support programs. Do you guys have TSA in Canada? Yes, no.
TSA.
Hmm.
We just have like the regular airline, like how you guys have like the TSA fast check or whatever.
Yeah.
We have through the regular line, it's a little different. It's
Okay.
not quite the same. No.
Well, I always talk about like it's TSA Cares and it's the medical program so that you can get help going through the airport through security and stuff. I always sign up for it because it's free and they help me from security all the way to my gate. So I
Yeah.
don't have to go to the airport, which can also be a very scary place all by myself. I get help.
Okay.
And I tell my clients that like there's so much help available to you if we just have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And like you're honest with me because I don't want you going on a trip and then regretting it later or not telling me everything like my child is nonverbal, a tour is going to be a horrible idea for us. Why can't we just sit on the beach? Like, I need to know these things. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like it's just scary, or maybe parents feel judged
I
about.
would I would definitely say I think there's a lot of parents that have a fear of judgment.
Yeah,
And, and just in some of the conversations I've had with people, I heard somebody that didn't want to get their child tested for ADHD because they thought then people would think it was that she was a lazy parent.
right.
Now, I had a different opinion on what makes a lazy parent in that scenario, but but the thing is though is that there is a judgment. And
Hmm.
because you're not going to sit there and explain to everybody, hi, my child's like my child's on the spectrum, blah blah blah. You're going to have the people look at you and like, can't you get your child in line?
Yeah,
I raised my kids, I don't want to say a lot of years ago, but my kids are full adults. So it was quite some time ago. And I do remember in a mall, like I live in a small town. Um, my son at the time was 2 years old and he threw himself down on the floor. So I walked away. And now, in fairness, I could see him in the reflections of the mirrors that were on the pillars. So I was watching him. But I remember one lady, and so this was like almost 25 years ago. And she's like, "Excuse me, your child." I'm like, "He's fine."
yeah.
And a minute later, I hear do 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 as his little feet run up behind me, and he grabs onto my hand. I said, "Are you going to behave?" And he's like, "Yes." I said, "Good, then let's go." You know, but I remember like almost 25 years ago, this older lady looking at me like, "How dare you? Like, how
Right.
could you?" But at the same time, if I would have just been like, "Come on, let's go," let's like, there, she was literally the only person in the mall basically at the time. And I was like, I wasn't getting, like, he wasn't out of sight. Like, there were so many things, but yet she felt the need, she needed to voice something to me, as if I had forgotten I had a 2-year-old that was stomping his
Right.
feet behind me. So I get that part of it in terms of what does that mean? What does that look like? And all of that. But I had a defiant 2-year-old who, when his mama left him, was like, well,
Right.
crap, we got to behave now. I can't imagine being worn down from, I don't, and again, I'm trying to be very careful of the language, but as one parent to another, to me, it would be that constant battle, that
Yeah.
constant energy drain just to have those conversations. And now you have this entire world of Karens with video cameras
Yes.
that I would think, even if they don't technically exist, there's this impression that they could be there. And so I would
Right.
think that that would be so mind blowing, exhausting that there would always be this constant over. So, yeah, I would think that it would make it that much harder.
So I feel like it's so much harder, but then there's that prevalence of like you said, the Karens with the video cameras, like, oh, my child is nonverbal and they are doing a vocal stem where it's just like humming or stemming loudly with their voice, and how that's offensive to somebody at a restaurant somewhere, and how
Yeah.
that can be a really scary situation even internationally, because our laws are different internationally
Mhm.
as well. So I totally get like how it can be just something that's like,
Right.
that just seems unattainable to me, and it's just easier to be at home. But even at home, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard too.
But those parents need to recharge their own batteries.
Yes. Hmm.
And so when we have a niche, there's a lot of coaches in the world that are going to be like, pick your niche and boom, you're going to have money. Like it's just
Yeah.
make it rain, make it rain, make it rain, especially if you have an influencer in your world. And in fact, you were shouted out by somebody very well known in the travel industry. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Miss Samantha Brown, I love her.
Just Samantha Brown. Yeah.
No big deal. No big deal. Like,
Now, for those that don't know who Samantha Brown is, do you want to share a little bit of that?
so I remember her. She used to be on the Travel Channel, many, 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 many years ago. And she like literally traveled the world. Like that was her whole show, was going different places. I followed her as a child because she went to the Walt Disney World Resort. What was the name of that show? It's not Places to Love. That's on PBS now, but it was
It was like a
um
places to go or something like,
I think that's the one now.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was because she's now on PBS, but she was on the Travel Channel, and I know she
Places
had a
to
lot of
love.
that. I think that one's the one now. Places to
I
Love
may
is
be
on.
Googling this as we're talking.
Okay. But I don't know, like she just has this warm, inviting personality, and she's been on the Travel Channel for a long time before she switched to PBS. And she found me. I followed her first, and then I made a post about traveling as a military family because I was saying that my husband's in the military, and like I've literally been in the military for the last 40 years, my whole life. Um, and I made a post about being a military family and traveling with a military family. And then I made a second post about, traveling as a military family with autistic children. And she shouted me out about, I think it was the Veterans Day post. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there was a second one where she mentioned me as offering unique service. And like, while it was great, like I was blasted in front of all these people, um, I have seen
Right.
zero outcome from that. A little tiny uptick in following. And I removed those followers because you know how that goes with interactions and engagement. If they're not engaging with you, they're just holding you down. So I was just like, this is not, it was great that she shouted me out, but it didn't help me in any way.
So I'm gonna say there. So there's a couple things. So long as they're not bots, just leave them.
Yeah.
Because the other
Okay.
thing is you don't know when one of them might pick it off. Because here's the thing. They a lot of them probably like, oh, that's cool. But there was something about it that made them want to follow you. One thing I think people forget is travel and I would think it's even more so for those with families on the spectrum or families dealing with any sort of medical situation and other such, their buying cycle gets further. And if you think of yourself, as a mom with autistic children,
Hmm.
I'm going to bet you probably don't have a lot of downtime just to surf the internet and engage and things like that. You're probably doing it in the 5 minutes that you're either in the soaking in the tub or on the toilet or like 5 minutes before you go
Eating
to bed,
breakfast quickly.
that little
Yeah.
bit. And
Right.
so, in which case, you're probably listening to it and consuming it, but you're not actually interacting with it. But knowing that they're there when they're there. So, I probably would not would not remove them. The other thing is that if you remove too many at a time, I have seen this happen to a local business in my own hometown. This happened to her not too long ago. She removed too many at one time and Instagram shut her account down, like locked it, froze it, gone. So got to be
Wow.
careful when you're doing that. I take training on social media and other such from some really big names in the industry. And they just say, they're like, you know what, just leave them. The bots will eventually disappear, things like that. People will self identify if it's not for them and they will remove them. My own socials go up and down daily. They do their own thing and whatnot. And I no longer worry about that. Unless I see somebody taking all of my stuff and immediately posting it on theirs because people send me screenshots or like, isn't
Yes.
this what you just said? I may remove somebody, but otherwise live and let live. And even at
Right.
that, I'm like, live and let live. You know what? They can't say it my way. It's not going to come
True.
across the same. And so it is what it is. But there's that. But what I really want to talk about here is the fact that you had the quote unquote influencer viral sort of scenario, and it doesn't automatically translate to sales. And
Mm-mm.
there's a couple of things with that. One, like I said, buying cycle. And especially in your specific niche, the buying cycle's longer,
Right.
because you've really got to overcome a lot of barriers. And while I absolutely love your niche and I think there is such a huge, huge, huge need for it, we also have to shift a little bit of the marketing in order to capture the sales. And
Right.
this is what we talked about beforehand. When you have a niche that solves very specific problems, the conversation has to change. And I have followed Dina, I don't know, for a few
Oh my
years, I'm
gosh.
sure.
Yeah. So at
And
least since I was in Colorado.
right? Yeah, like
Yeah.
way back in the day.
Yes.
And so I get to watch a lot of hers. And so I love the way you talk about things. I love your open and your honesty. And I can see where people would totally resonate with that. But it's also important that we really talk about the solutions.
Right.
I used to feel this way, but I don't anymore because my clients feel this way and I help them so that they can experience this. We want to make sure that we don't just highlight the negatives, but the actual solutions. Because again, in this type of a niche, people are like, OMG, the thought of even just packing, because if I forget their specific blanket or I drop what happens if we're there and they lose their blanket? Well, let's get a
Right.
backup. When your child is so completely attached to something and that is their one comfort item, you better have a backup, and it better already be washed in your fabric, like in your fabric softener or your
Yeah.
washing, it needs to smell like them. It needs to smell like our house. Not that people's houses smell, but the kids
No, but
smell,
there's an aroma. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, we wash our dog's bed and they're like, no, this doesn't smell like this. I'm like, just rub on it for a minute, you'll be fine. Like,
Right.
but that's my
It's
dog,
true. Yeah.
and they don't like change. But now we have children, and and I don't know if you remember, but I definitely remember when my kids were babies, I couldn't breastfeed, so they were bottle fed. And just going from my house to my mom's, because especially with my youngest, we lived a couple hours away. So we'd go stay there for a couple days at a time, mixing up his bottles. The water was different. So sure enough, his system was different.
Yeah.
That is something that I think people on the spectrum are even more heightened. They notice things. And like what you were saying, behavior is communication. I think sometimes that they are taking in so much more than we are. They are so much more aware that even the smallest things can adjust. So in which case, creating these, I would be creating marketing that's based on how you're going to help them make it easier, because they don't want something that's going to make it harder.
Right.
And I think this goes for every niche that's out there. It's fun and easy and nice to be able to post beautiful pictures and to do this and to do that and to show them how amazing it's going to be. That's not what makes people buy. It's
That's
how
true.
we avoid the struggles. What are the solutions to the problems? Because people are less likely to be drawn to pleasure than they are to avoid pain. And when something is harder to travel, when it gets harder to do something, and so again, when we're talking about a special needs family, it's harder to go on vacation, which means it's easier to not go on vacation. So we need to change that conversation. We need to let them see how we're going to make it easier. And perhaps, and I'm just like spitballing ideas, what if there was somebody who would come in and help you prep before you left for your vacation? Because you were saying like respite care and things like that. What if there was somebody that they had come in just for the sole intention, whether it's to look after the children so you can pack that day, or that they come in with the list and help you go through it, and there's something like with that in place that you can go through. But anytime we make things harder, they're not going to choose it. I've seen a lot of the posts. Being skinny is hard. Being overweight is hard. Choose your hard. Choose your hard is a really good quote. But at the same time, it's also true. And so often our clients are going to choose the hard that they think is less painful. And that's, for myself, I'm no skinny mini. Yeah, being skinny is hard. Being overweight's hard. It's just less hard in the current moment. And so that's where I stay. And I have all these dreams. And actually, I don't need to be, okay, we're chasing a squirrel here. I don't need to be skinny, but I want to feel healthy and I want to not hurt and I want all of these other things. But then at the end of the day, when I'm stressed out and I'm exhausted and I'm this and I'm that and everything else, I'm like, where's my friggin' bag of chips? Like, just give me the chips. That's all I need. because I'm worried about this moment. How do I make myself feel better in this moment? And so when we're reaching out to families that are going through some significant struggles with their children, and it doesn't matter if they're on the spectrum or they're not, raising children is hard. Like it's just straight up hard. And so, if you were to say to a mom who hasn't slept for however many weeks or months or anything, and I'm saying this coming off of a long weekend where I had a ton of family in my house and my sleep is crap. Like if you said to me right now, like if they were still here another week or two and they're like, okay, so we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I'm like, for the love of all that's holy, could you please go home? And yet I adore them and I loved having them and everything else. And then the one night, my son, one of my sons was home and he just, all of a sudden, you just see the color change in his face. And I was like, wait, you're sick. And so then I was going around handing everybody cold FX and this and that and everything. I'm like, vitamin C, like you want a drink? Yep. We're going to give you like an emergency. Like people are pumped on vitamin C because the idea of getting sick while I'm so tired is just not an option. So in which case, with as tired as it was, I'm like, no, I will get up and make you a drink because I'm pouring some more vitamin C in it. Like you are all drinking vitamin C. But we have these things where we are so overwhelmed that no matter how amazing a vacation sounds, no matter how amazing it would be to go dip your toes in the sand, to go do this, go do that, it's too hard to get past it. But if somebody is there who understands you so deeply to your core of how hard it's going to be and says, I get it. I know how hard it is. Let me make it easy. How would that change the conversation? And I think sometimes that's where, when we talk about niche, especially in the marketing world, it's all about, okay, so we're going to just talk about this, but we also got to talk about the part that's preventing them from actually buying. And so it's not, choosing a niche is not surface level. It is a deep, full understanding of the people. It's deeply understanding what's also going to prevent them from buying, and then creating content, creating conversation around that. And, when we talked before, there's so many things that go along with that. You were talking earlier, one of your clients this year was a mom with children on the spectrum. She just had to get away. She had to go. And so, let's normalize the conversation of parents taking respite. Because here's the scoop. Yes, it's respite care for your children, but really it's for you. And so we need to have a deeper conversation on that. We need to normalize parents raising special needs children, putting themselves first from once in a while. Because I can't imagine. I've been at home with toddlers who were sick and needed my attention 24/7. And it lasted for 2 or 3 days and I was exhausted. I can't imagine having children that need me 24/7 their entire life. I can't imagine how that feels. And so you are in this beautiful position where you do understand them. And I know some people are going to be like, you just called that beautiful? It is, because you are going to understand and be able to empathize with your clients in a way that nobody else can. When I was working with my clients with children on the spectrum, I was able to empathize. I couldn't necessarily sympathize because I didn't have that same connection that you would have, but I could definitely have empathy for them and for their situation. And therefore, my job was to make it as simple as humanly possible for them, to make it as absolutely easy for them, because then it becomes a no-brainer. Because when we take something as complicated as planning a trip, as complicated as, oh my goodness, how do I get extra people? Then the conversation switches. And I get it. We were talking before, like you said, why would I go? Like, why would I go do this when there's going to be so many people and there's going to be so much this, so much that, there's so much stimulation for my kids and this, that, the other. my question becomes, yes, that's stimulation for your children, but how much of it is overstimulation for yourself at this point? Because the other thing is, as parents of children that need to have that stimulation reduced, reduce their own stimulations. I've noticed that for myself during COVID. I used to work in a physical office up till 2019, or end of 2018, early 2019, where I saw people every single day. Now, if I record too many podcasts in a day where I'm talking to somebody else, and sometimes that somebody else is myself, I'm just seeing people. I will go upstairs and my husband will be like, "Let's go do something." I'm like, "No, I'm overpeopled." He's like, "You haven't left the house." I'm like, I've done too many people today." He's
Yeah,
like, "You
it's too much.
recorded solo episodes." I'm like, "I know, but I saw myself the whole time and I'm over it." And so that's why with having all of this family, which I love and adore, I am beyond exhausted because I
Mhm.
have peopled. I went to Vancouver, spoke on a stage, did this, that, the other, came home, and I'm like, okay, well, now when I go to Toronto, I already know we're just booking the next day off because I'm over peopled.
Yeah.
And so the more we reduce the amount of stimulation on those parents, that becomes the next thing. So in which case, how do we create oases within what they want to do? How do we create things within that? And when we can start sharing some of that within our marketing, within our stories, within what we do with our clients, it's going to make them lean in even harder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I would take some marinating to like, I mean, to think about it, right?
Mhm.
So now I'm like, oh no, I'm overthinking my marketing for a Disney cruise.
But you know what? But that's just it. And actually, I love that you said that. And I started off this show saying that you were going to say things that everybody else is feeling, but thinking they're the only ones.
Right.
We all overthink our marketing,
Hmm.
especially when we are so close to the content.
Right.
You know, I want you to think about, what do you like if you could wave a magic wand and make something happen? What's the first thing? Like, you're booking booking, somebody's booking you on a trip to Disney World. You could wave a magic wand for your kids. What is the first thing that comes to mind that you would love to have disappear or be better or fixed?
Well, I think the first thing, and it's with me and my two boys, is the anxiety about not knowing what I'm getting into.
Okay. Okay.
That's real scary. And I think my
Yep.
clients also experience that too, because I've noticed an influx of questions during the booking process, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I get it. I get
Yep.
being terrified that you have no idea what you're
Yep.
getting into
Yep.
at all. That's
Yep.
scary.
And that's just it, because they are coming out of this pattern and this routine that everybody knows. Because one of the
Yeah.
things you said before is, but my kids are on a routine. I'm going to tell you, there are parents whose kids are not on a spectrum. They have all been taught in these last few years, you keep your kids on a routine. And I'm like, how do you live? And
I
then
know.
I have a friend whose kids are not on a routine. And I'm like, how do you live?
I,
Because I will run into her. It's 11:30 at night. She's got her kids in the back of the vehicle and they're wide awake. And
right.
I'm like,
What's going
huh?
on here?
Like, it's past my bedtime. What are your kids
I
doing up there? Like 2 and 4. And she's like, we just sleep when we sleep so that we can go do what we want and this, that, the other. And I'm like, whoo, okay, crazy. But it works for them. But I will
know.
say, they always talk, like, years ago, it was FOMO. For years and years and years, it was FOMO, the fear of missing out. It is fully changed into the fear of messing up. And I can see where things are already at such a heightened requirement, such a heightened level, that that's an even more stressing sort of thing. I would think that if you were talking to travel advisors that have been in the industry for many years, they would probably all tell you, in a post-pandemic world, the list of questions is a mile higher,
Yeah.
that it is so much more. And now we're going to add in all of these additional special needs and other such. So I would say that even making that a part of your marketing, if you've got questions, don't worry about it. I will tell you that the amount of questions and anxieties that we are helping our clients with has dramatically increased. So if you're feeling like you can't do this because you have all these questions, don't worry. You're just like everybody else. And how would a parent of a special needs child feel if they find out they're just like everybody else.
Would not feel so alone, that is for sure. Like,
Right?
you know,
Because I would think like parenting is a very solo experience, even though it's something most of the world experiences. And therefore, it is wild to think that we are on our own and that we're the only ones going through it, yet we're not. And so to have somebody say, you're not alone, these are some of the questions that I get. This is how I help my clients. These are some of the things that I'm going to help work you through. What does it look like? So I would take a list, and it's, for lack of a better term, it's their biggest fears, their biggest worries, their biggest anxieties, and start working through that. What are the things that are making them too hesitant to even reach out? It goes back to that same example I give all the time of the massage therapist that always posts, I have an opening at 4, I have an opening at 2, I have a whatever. Instead of saying, if you've ever wondered how naked do I have to get, here's the information. Because until people have experienced it for the first time, there's too many questions. They don't want to feel stupid. They don't want to ask something that's embarrassing, all of these sorts of things. So therefore, it's easier not to open that pain item. Does that make sense?
yes. And now I feel better about my cruise now. I book a lot of cruises, and I think that cruising is cruising and all inclusives are really easy for autistic families. Because one, there contained spaces. There can be a routine. You have your schedule, like with your cruise schedule, you know what you're doing at this time, this time, this time, this time. If you choose to do it, and you can go and you can stay in your stateroom and eat every single meal if you want to, or if you're feeling adventurous, you can go and dine with characters, and it's always loud, but your defenders are welcome. And there was some things on the cruise that I was like, oh man, if I had just known like the muster drill was going to be hell,
Mm-hmm.
I would have prepared better,
Yep.
or I have clients that have children that are still, they have children, period, right? And children have accidents, and like, what's going to happen if I don't have anywhere to wash my kids' clothes?
Yep.
Do I have to pay for the expensive laundry services on the ship? Or is there a laundromat? Oh my gosh, there's a laundromat. How about that? Like,
Yep. Yep.
Just those things that you have to prepare for. I think that's the biggest thing. It's
Right.
like, how
I'm just thinking on that same thought. Because I know even my kids went through a phase where I felt like I was washing the same clothes every single night because it's the only thing they would be willing to wear the next day. And
right.
so have that conversation. If this is your kid, don't worry. Just make sure you let me know, and we're going to adjust what cruise line we put you on, what hotel we put you in, because we're going to make sure you have access to a laundry system, because that can be part of it. And when you do that, you're also going to put in there, if this is you, make sure you take your own detergent. So again, it smells like their clothing. Because I used to laugh. My kids would go to my mom's house and she uses a different brand of laundry detergent than I did. And they'd be like, Nana's washing machine made my blanket smell funny. And I'm like, was it funny good or funny bad? They're like, just funny. And but it's true.
Different.
Yeah. And
right.
if they're already oversensitized, how can we reduce those sensitivities? And so how many things can we keep the same across the board? Again, a child not on the spectrum may not notice those things, but at the same time, they might also. Children as a whole have heightened sensitivities when they're traveling because they're being stimulated. I'm going back to my family being here. My dogs slept the whole time they were here because my one dog is so freaking anxiety ridden. We actually had to leave a leash on him. We called it his safety blanket. When all the other people would get up, I'm like, okay, we should go put your safety blanket on. And we would put it on him, lay it across his back, and he would go from anxious to sleeping. And so I said to my husband, I'm like, just so you know, for the full day after they leave, they're still going to sleep. The day after, they're going to be freaking nightmares because now they will have slept all this time. So they are going to be like so ready to go.
Right.
These are dogs.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to compare people's children and dogs, but what
No,
I'm
I know.
saying is a being is a being. And so I have, now that I don't have children at home, I'm more highly aware of my animals. After my family left yesterday, I had to race over to a meeting, came home. I had a 3-hour break between that and the next meeting. I totally had a nap. I had 3 cats in my bed because they were all like, okay, yeah, no, like we're all doing this. I had a dog on each side of the bed on the floor. And it just
Right.
like the 5 of us were, or 6 of us were just out. And my husband sat on the couch playing his video game because he needed his, like, we
Yes.
all go through that. And so to let people know that they're just like everybody else, that's huge. And that is a part of sales. And sometimes that doesn't get looked at.
Mm.
Sales is about building a connection with somebody so that they are comfortable to give you the objections, so that they're comfortable to have those conversations, so that they're comfortable to say, I don't know if I can do this, so that you can say to them, what can we do to make you comfortable? And as you said, it's the not knowing.
Yeah.
Everybody's like that before they do something for the first time. I gave an example on stage about my first time using Uber, and it was absolutely hilarious how it went because I had never done a solo Uber
Right.
until just in Vancouver here. And my experience, and I was nervous, and I'm texting my son and this, that, the other. And yet everybody in the crowd is laughing because they're like, we do Uber all the time. I'm like, we don't have Uber where I am. And I'm like, is it safe?
Right.
Where do I sit?
Like, what if somebody's gonna like kidnap me or like,
Right. And then somebody tried to get in my car and I'm like, wait, did I book a shared one? Like, how did I do this? Like,
yeah.
I'm confused. And it's all of these different sorts of things. So how do we take all of those fears and worries and questions they have and simplify it? And then because you are in such a beautiful niche and you have it so defined, how do we now then talk about it within that and make
Yeah,
them feel
that's good.
comfortable?
Right.
Yeah.
Man, I have to marinate that one. I don't know. How
Right.
do we talk about it?
You
Yeah.
know what? Every time you get a question. So when people join my Facebook group, it
Mm-hmm.
says, what obstacle are you facing in your travel business? I now have 27 pages in a Google Doc of what those obstacles are,
Yeah.
because I record it. So when I'm looking to build content, when I'm looking at what kind of podcasts to record, when I'm looking at all of these different sorts of things, a really common one that's coming in right now is I need help finding clients, can't find clients. Where do I find my clients?
Yep.
I'm here to tell you, they are not out in the wild with a big shiny bow on them. You have
Right.
to have a conversation that they're going to lean into. In this case, with Dina, it's on her Spectrum Getaways, where it's families of autistic children or autistic adults. And how do we do that? So, how do we have that conversation with them? And when you're having a conversation, it's not surface level and it's not about you, it is
Yeah.
about them. Have you ever felt this way? Has this ever made you think this? Did the moment that diagnosis come in, did you suddenly decide in that moment that you would never get to do things like travel, never get to do things like this, that, or the other? It doesn't have to be that way. You can definitely still travel, but what you need is an expert in how to travel with an autistic family member. Because we're going to help set you up with respite. We're going to help set you up with a caregiver. We're going to help set you up with this. We're going to make sure that we get you through the TSA line. We're going to make sure we do this, that, the other. And I was thinking, we do have like an expedited. If you talk to security at most airports, I think they'll move you through. It's a
Okay.
little bit
Okay.
different.
Yeah.
But the TSA
It's
Cares is an
different.
entire
Different.
program and other such.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
there's all of these things,
Right.
and we're going to
Or
help
even
walk you
down to
through it.
like, because I was thinking, I have this tourism operator I love for Japan as well, and like they um alleviate so much stress for me, right?
I
But
love
then
it.
also to my clients as well, because like they send me, and I'm sure other operators probably do this sometimes, but they send me what the tour operators, like the tour guides look like. So like
Love it.
when my clients are gonna find them, it's not like, oh my gosh, I don't know who I'm looking for. I don't know what this person looks like. Does this person have any experience with an autistic family member? And I think it's amazing. All
Right?
tour operators do that. Just
Yeah.
one little headshot. Send me what they look like.
How simple. There's a
Yeah.
book called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Garda. I can't pronounce his last name. Anyways, he talks about those little things. And yes, a photo. How amazing would that be? This is who you're going to be looking for. Even just describing, I used to talk about when they would go to the all-inclusives. You got to go through the Shark Tank because that's where all the timeshare sharks are. Your ride will always be outside. With the companies that I use, that's where their ride always was. If they are
Yeah.
inside, you are still in the Shark Tank. Go keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And when you would do it that way, it would make sense. And they would remember that because it can be a little bit of a sensory, depending on the terminals, other such, that suddenly all these sharks are there and they're on you. And it's like, nope, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And if you can break it down for them step by step that way, and then they have a photo of who it is that they're looking for. Wow. Like that in itself. So even just to create a social post from time to time, how much you love working with this company because that's what they do.
Mm,
Because
okay.
that's
I love
also
that.
going to let those people who are just looky-looing you go, wait, that would be one thing I can cross off my list.
Yeah.
We all have this mental list of all the reasons why we can't. So
Hmm.
your job in marketing and sales is to figure out how to cross off all of those lines.
Yeah. Because before I'm just saying things like, I can book you a trip because I'm a mom with an autistic child and I get it.
Yeah.
And then it just kind
The
of,
key to the key to marketing when it's sales focused is so that I am a mom of an autistic family, autistic child, however you want to word it, and a travel advisor so that other families with autistic family members are able to see the world while reducing the stress, while reducing the anxiety, having all of their questions answered, all of the things. What is the so that?
right.
And
Yeah.
that
So that
is
we
for
can get out in
all
the
travel
world.
advisors.
Yeah.
Why would you work with a travel advisor? Well, you're going to want to work with a travel advisor so that. Why would you want to work with a wedding expert? You want to work with a wedding expert so that. When you can answer the so that in your marketing, it's going to start shifting your conversions.
I love it. I think that makes sense. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we are going to leave it there for today. I thank
Okay.
you all for tuning in. And until next time, happy selling.